Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to start the evening with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. Pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now let's introduce Steve Johnson, publisher of Coronado.
Hi everybody, my name is Steve Johnson. I am the publisher and founder of the Coronado Times. It's been our privilege over the last 14 years as Coronado, and now as the Coronado Times, to bring you news, events, and different happenings going on around Coronado. I'm so happy that you guys are here tonight. We're filming it, so if you're watching later on, thank you for watching this. And especially thank you to those that sent in questions that are going to help shape our forum tonight. Did you know that in the last 20 years, we've only had 2 mayors of Coronado? We've had Mayor Tom Smizek for 12 years, and the Honorable Casey Tanaka for the last 8. So this is a big deal for Coronado. It's been a while since we've had a new mayor and new council folks, so this election, we're electing 2 new council and 1 new mayor. And we could not be more excited to put this event on tonight, and many thanks especially for the candidates who have been to so many different events during this election season. So with that, I would like to introduce Mayor Casey Tanaka to kick off the forum tonight, and also remind you how this opens.
I'm hosting a going out of business sale for myself in 2 months. Thanks for being here. I do want to thank you. I want to thank the candidates for being willing to serve our great city. I want to thank Steve Johnson. I want to thank Anne-Marie for what I know will be a great job moderating this evening. But most of all, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for taking the time to be an informed voter, to do your due diligence. I want to follow up on something Steve said. No matter what happens, we're going to have 2 new city council members, and we're going to have a new mayor. And there's no way around the fact that this is a turning point moment. And for you to do your job as a citizen, you have to research these candidates. You're doing that today. And on behalf of our city, who counts on your knowledge, your wisdom to help guide us, I want to thank you for being informed voters tonight. And I want to thank you ahead of time for being respectful. I know that you're going to be excited about what these candidates have to say. And one of the things that sets Coronado apart from other cities is how informed and how involved our electorate is. So thank you for being that great city.
Good evening. My name is Anne-Marie Bryant, and I will be your moderator for tonight's community forum. I wanted to let you know a little bit about myself first. I'm a U.S. government teacher, a history professor at Rosemont College, and I write for the Coronado Times. I also grew up in Coronado, graduated from Coronado High School, and am a Coronado resident today. It is my honor to be your moderator this evening. Each candidate will first have 2 minutes to give an opening statement. We will start with Mr. Benzian, and proceed to the left. Audience, please hold your applause until the end of the forum and silence your cell phones. Mr. Benzian?
Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Can y'all hear me well?
Yeah.
First of all, I thank Steve and Coronado Times for putting this nice event on. It's really impressive to see how Steve has grown his business or his paper over the last 14 years, and thank you, Casey, for your service, Mr. Mayor. The reason I'm running for city council is because I'm passionate about Coronado, just like you are. I was raised in Coronado, I'm raising my family in Coronado, and I care about the future. I want to preserve the character and the charm of our community, and I think I have this right skill set to do that. I'm a homegrown Islander, as I said. I'm a graduate of Coronado High School, and Coronado is central to my identity. Whether it was learning to surf at North Beach, my first job at Cafe 1134, or being the youngest president of the Coronado Historical Association, our community shaped me and my identity. Following high school here, I went back east to go to college, and then I came back to California and got a graduate degree in public policy, master's in public policy, and I came and put that to use in San Diego. I worked at City Hall as a public policy advisor. I worked on land use issues, transportation issues, a variety of things. I understood how municipal budgeting works, and how municipal government works. I want to bring that skill set here to Coronado. I also knew when I was living abroad and living back east that I wanted to come back to Coronado and get active in the community. I just always felt a pull to come home. So I did. And in that, when I came home, I reactivated the Coronado 2030 Club, a service club for young adults, where I served as president. We put on events like Screen on the Green at Tidelands Park. I was also, as I mentioned, president of the Coronado Historical Association. I served there during a very tumultuous time where we had to reorganize the association. We implemented internal controls, brought the association's first audits, and now it's a very well-run organization. It was always well-run, but it's cleaner and more professionalized now. And then there's other community roles that I've had. I've been I was Coronado for that time. Just like that? Incredible. I've got so much more to say. But you'll learn a little bit about I think, in short, I have very balanced municipal and private sector experience that I hope to bring to the council and work for you. And time is so many times. It didn't work. So. Thank you all for listening.
All right, thanks, Benzina. Mr. Donovan.
Well, thank you to the Coronado Times for hosting this forum, and to all of you for spending some time with us to hear what we have to say this evening. My name is Mike Donovan, and I'm running for City Council here in Coronado because it seems to me over the last 10 or 15 years that several decisions have been made by our City Council that favor special interests as opposed to the residents. It feels like the residents are losing the priority that we deserve in City Council decisions. As a result, I want to run to represent, make sure that the residents are fully represented at City Hall and to maintain the residential quality of life here in Coronado. Now, by way of background, I attended the U.S. Naval Academy, graduated from there in 1974, then attended MIT on a Navy scholarship, earning a master's degree in naval architecture and marine engineering. I then came to Coronado in 1976, 40 years ago, and I've been a resident ever since. I spent 30 years in the Navy, 10 years on active duty, served on 2 ships out of San Diego here, one of them tied up at North Island, the USS Long Beach, and then 20 years in the Naval Reserve, retiring after 30 years as a Navy captain. I also have corporate business experience, having just completed 33 years with Solar Turbines Incorporated over in San Diego, which is a division of Caterpillar. It's about a $5 billion business. While at Solar, I served in many different positions, some of which where I supervised over 100 employees and managed operational and capital budgets in the multi-million dollars. I also led cross-functional teams to improve quality and process improvements in the business. So the combination of my corporate business experience and my Navy leadership, I feel like I have a lot to bring as a City Council member, and I look forward to the discussion we're going to have here tonight, addressing some of the issues that face us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Mr. Hauser.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ron Hauser, and I'm also running for City Council. My primary motivation in my decision to run for City Council were 2 recent articles I saw in the paper, the Union paper and the Coronado Eagle paper, about a proposed bicycle and pedestrian tunnel that's supposed to be attached to Coronado Bridge running from Coronado to San Diego. Article said $75,000 was proposed to study this proposed tunnel, and that it had 70% support. I don't know where that 70% came from. I don't think it was from Coronado. The tunnel would be nothing more than a transient homeless bridge for Coronado. We have about 10 homeless people in Coronado right now. San Diego, 2 miles across the bay, has 2,000. I also believe in the Rudy Giuliani book and mental philosophy. It takes the small things and the big things and take care of themselves. We have plenty of laws and codes in Coronado. We don't need any more regulations. Coronado already has more regulations than any in the county. We just need to enforce the laws and codes that we have now. Speaking to the various department heads, I've learned that Coronado takes the reactive rather than the proactive attitude on issues. The philosophy that works fine most of the time is that when somebody makes a complaint, then we investigate. We can't just rely on neighbors reporting to other neighbors. Sometimes the city has to take action on their own. I believe in common sense. I support stop and frisk. If somebody is acting suspiciously, stop them and find out what they're doing. Stop a bicycle theft or burglary before it takes place. Please report after the fact. Without the suspect information, we have little value. What's the beautification of elder program in Coronado? set up the commission, staff with volunteers, clean up the alleys, apply some landscaping, pick up the trash, put some paint on, make the alley something beautiful that we can all enjoy walking down. Regarding my background for city council, I have been practicing in state planning for 28 years. 25-year veteran of the sheriff's department. Time? I got so much fun.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. And thank you, Mr. Hunt.
Good evening. Thank you to the Coronado Times, publisher Steve Johnson, moderator Anne-Marie Bryant for hosting this forum, for giving us all a chance to hear citizens' concerns and address them. The Navy brought me to Coronado in the 1980s, and I've kept my home here ever since. After completing an active duty career as a Navy Explosive Ordnance Disposal Officer, I've immersed myself in our community. In addition to being a village director on the Coronado Cays Homeowners Association, I've been on our community emergency response team, I've been on our city street tree committee, and I'm currently the vice chairman of the planning commission of the city of Coronado. I have significant municipal experience. My military experience as a bomb squad leader and subsequent work in Homeland Defense and this past decade of involvement in the city government afford me the skills and the problem-solving abilities that I think are needed on our city council. I'm ready to serve you on the council, but most importantly, I'm ready to listen to all sides and try to reach a rational, reasonable decision that will help keep Coronado a special place. As a council member, I will listen to the citizens, examine the facts, and make the best decisions I can. I don't have an agenda that I want to do something or want something to stop. I do have areas that I'm interested in. The first is public safety. I think that we need to make sure that our fire and police departments are well resourced and that our emergency planning is up to speed and ready for any disaster. We also need to engage our citizens in that emergency planning so that every citizen knows what to do if we had a big disaster here. The second area that I'm looking at is the community quality of life. I think my degrees in architecture and mechanical engineering give me some knowledge and will help me contribute to issues like zoning and construction standards, like traffic management, issues like working with the tourism improvement district to make sure we get the appropriate tourism in Coronado. And then my third area that I focus on is financial management. My parents were adults during the Depression. My father lost his life savings in the banks. So I grew up in an environment where you didn't spend money unless you had to. I'll guard our city resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Matson.
Hi, I'm Derek Glenn. Thanks, Steve, and Coronado Times for having us here tonight. Thanks to all of you for coming. It shows that you're part of the community. My story starts a little over 10 years ago. I'm originally from Crown Point, Crown City of Indiana. And I was on vacation, and I was dropping my brother-in-law at North Island. I came over the bridge, and the second I came over, I knew this is going to be the home for the rest of my life. There's a beautiful community. The houses were amazing. It felt like something out of a movie. And that's what I want to preserve about Coronado. I went out that day, the first day that I came here, and I found a job that I still have to this day, lucky enough. And Coronado is just the best community, and the voices that I hear, because I work in business, I talk to residents every day. So I get a feel of what they want. And I have a feeling I know what the residents of Coronado want. I'm also a president of the Coronado Lions Club, and I've been involved with the community. I talk to a lot of people, and I think me talking to so many locals and residents makes me a very good person to run for city council. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bailey.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank Coronado Times, and I'd like to thank all of you for joining us tonight and sharing this discussion about our city's future. My name is Richard Bailey, and I'm running to become the 51st mayor of Coronado. The reason I decided to run for this position is because I believe our residents deserve a more responsive city government, and I think that we have a real opportunity to make progress towards the issues that we have faced for the last 10, 20, 30 years, but that it will require more involvement from the community and a new style of leadership for us to see real results. I was first elected to the city council back in 2012. I ran on a platform of fiscal responsibility and community engagement, actually listening to the people that I was running to represent. My professional background comes largely from the private sector. I spent several years working in corporate finance for Goodrich Aerospace. I moved over to a management position at a smaller manufacturing operation, and then I started my own business, and I'm now a consultant in the aerospace industry. And I have to say that I think the skill sets developed in the private sector translate very nicely to City Hall, whether it's streamlining how government services are administered, or seeking a better return on your tax dollars, or incorporating new technology into how we do our day-to-day business activities, I think that this mindset allows us to better serve you. But I think that the best way we can serve you, the best thing we can do, is to simply listen. I think that the role of the city council and the mayor is to actively seek your input, listen, and then make a decision that is representative of the entire community, not just one small segment. And that's why I'm running to be your next mayor. Because I think that with your input and a new style of leadership, we can make some real progress. That's what I've done as your council member for the last 4 years, and that's what I look forward to continuing to do if elected your next mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mrs. Downs.
Thank you also to the Coronado Times. The opportunity to talk to all of you today is wonderful, but I greatly appreciate the filming so people that couldn't be here will be able to watch it. Part of what's wonderful about this election is how far our city has come in getting information to our residents. But when I first moved here back 22 years ago, you couldn't even read the council agenda before the meetings. There was one copy at the library. That didn't make sense to me. It was before the internet. We literally had no way to figure out what our government was doing. I worked for the Navy when I came here. I served my country for 9 years. And I realized my government, the federal government, could scan an agenda, put it online. Why couldn't the city? So I pushed for that. It didn't happen until after I was elected in 2004, but that was the first step in getting you all the information you need so you could understand what your government was doing, so you could participate in setting those policies. I continued to push for that. Once I realized our city manager created a city manager update, which gave all the staff of the city a weekly update on all the projects going on, I knew some residents had questions about some of the projects, about a sewer line or about a stop sign. So I started forwarding it until the city manager came and said to me, "What are you doing? That's for staff." And I said, "Well, it's a public record. Residents would like to have it." So he said, "But I write it for our staff." I said, "Well, maybe we do it differently." And that's what happened. That's why we have the city manager's report, and that's why it's always gone out to the community. Now, we have upgraded our website so that you can get all the access to what you want. I've been serving you for 10 years as your elected official. I've raised my children in our school, and I am the only person who is endorsed by all 3 previous mayors. We talked about how long it's been. The 50th, 49th, and 48th mayors, Casey Tanaka, Tom Smizek, and Mary Herron, all recognize my service, my education as attorney, and my working with government will help us move into the future as we look at what we're doing for our new entryway. And I hope to be your 51st mayor.
Thank you, Mrs. Downing. All right, our first questions this evening are about city finances. But first, I would like to give some context for this question. Currently, Coronado has a general fund that stands at over $38 million. That is $16 million over the required adopted reserves. This surplus is not just this year. In fact, in previous years, we have had an excess of $18 million. Balancing the budget is not the problem. The majority of our revenue, over 50%, comes from property tax. Property tax is the most stable revenue source for our city. Over the past 5 years, property tax has increased by $4.8 million, or 21%. As the value of Coronado property continues to rise, the reserves are expected to grow as well. Residents have asked these questions. What are your plans to deal with future revenue and the sentiment that too much money is with the city government and not in the hands of the taxpayers? And specifically, what makes you qualified to manage the city's money? Mr. Munt, we will start with you and then move to your right to Mr. Hines.
Well, city finances, if we have excess in money, something we have to look into is our pension plan. We have 241 active employees, 467 inactive employees. If we have excess money, we should pay into the future of our pension, or pay off our pensions. Down the line, we can see is this could be a debt in the future. That's not what we want. We don't want debt in the future. We want money in the bank. Anytime we have money in the bank, that's a good thing. Like we talked about going into a new idea of 401ks for some city employees, not police officers and firefighters. But I got some information today that if we tried to do that, we'd have to pay a lump sum. So I'm thinking that's probably not a good approach anymore. Our pension plan that we have going right now seems to be pretty stable, and if anything, let's pay off the debt while we have it. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gunn. Mr. Hines.
Thank you. As you heard in my introduction, I'm very conservative with my money. And I take disagreement with the idea that we have too much in surplus. We may have more than legally required minimums, but I think that if we're going to be a wise and responsible city, it's important to keep good reserves so that we don't have to go borrow money when we have to make an improvement. Most of us know in our personal lives that if we can save money and spend that money rather than borrowing and paying interest, that's a better thing. I think that's good for our city. I don't think that we have too much money. We have a lot of liabilities, as Mr. Munn said, for pensions. We are doing some advanced funding of that to help with that, but we have to make sure that we look ahead to those kinds of issues on the funding. On our city infrastructure, we need to recapitalize some of our city infrastructure. Most of you know that we have done a great job over the past 15, 20 years of building new buildings, but there's some underground infrastructure, our sewer lines, our water lines, our drainage lines that need to be redone. There's some capital improvement projects on the books that we have to pay for, and we need money to do that. So I'm not a fan of giving away the money just because we have it. I think you keep it in the bank and you use it on those things that benefit the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Hauser.
If we have an extra, I think according to the budget that I've seen, the city looks like it's pretty financially sound. We've got surplus in revenue over expenditure, so I think, as the question was posed, we're financially pretty sound. I would like to see, if we spend money, extra money, going to our reserve, I'd like to see this money spent in the best interest of the residents of the city. I don't want to spend this money on visitors coming to our city. I want to improve 75 until 82. We're probably going to take, I'm sure that's going to be a question right now. We're probably going to take over those pieces of our real estate. And we should probably improve it, that's our, we're looking at that right now, set some money aside for that. I would like to fix the streets, fix the alleys, build a better landscape, plant some more trees, put some air conditioning units in the schools. It'll take about $27 million to air condition the schools, by what I've read. Right now we have a lot of hot days because the temperature gets over 90 degrees. That's going to get only worse. Kids shouldn't have to be sitting in this weather. And they shouldn't get out of school after a half day. Invest the money in the schools, invest in the citizens, invest in the city. Don't invest the money in people coming to visit. I don't think it's not in the city and residents.
Thank you, Mr. Hauser. Mr. Donovan.
I think the city has done a really fine job over the years managing the budget. You know, when the big recession hit in 07 and 08, I read all the time about California cities and other cities around the country that were hurting, and Coronado just sailed right on, steady as you go. So that's been a really great management effort, in my opinion. We do have a rather large reserve for our budget. In some areas where I'd like to see us spend more money, for example, would be the Mills Act. I think we could afford to spend a little bit more money to incentivize historical preservation by providing the Mills Act advantage for property tax savings to our residents. I think another area that we could spend a little bit more money and effort is in the overall umbrella of enforcement. I think there's a lot of areas where we could improve in how we enforce things that go on in our city, and by that I don't just mean the police. I mean, you know, building codes, other things like that, where other parts of the city staff could participate in that. We do need to keep headcount down, as was mentioned. Pension is a huge part. You know, that's really managed by CalPERS, the state of California. Again, Coronado's done a fine job maintaining our input to that fund for our employees. And then, as was mentioned, from a capital standpoint, I think the wastewater and rainwater systems do need some upgrading. But most of the other buildings have been rebuilt in the last 10 to 15 years. So I think we're pretty good with our public buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Mr. Benson.
Great, thank you. Absolutely echo some of the comments here, so to try not to repeat myself. I'm going to continue the same great fiscal management leadership that our past councils have administered. We have a terrific track record, one of the greatest cities in the state, the most well-managed cities in the state. As Mike pointed out, during the recession, we were the only people not laying, one of the only cities not laying people off. So we do want to protect our reserve. We should be very thankful and lucky, and that's due to years and years of excellent planning and preparation for this. So we don't want to shift gears and spend for no apparent reason. That said, there are some capital improvement projects that probably could use our attention. I'm a believer in looking at 3rd and 4th Street and those corridors and figuring out a way to plant more trees, better looking trees, to create more of a canopy feel that will hopefully create an avenue feel for Coronado when you're coming off the bridge. You've got our new gateway project, hopefully looking snazzy. This will add to that feel and hopefully just subconsciously slow people down. There's also potential for some state mandates that we're going to have to prepare for. There's some environmental regulations regarding stormwater that we may have to redo a lot of our stormwater drains so that they're cleaner and more efficient than they are now. Those are things we need to prepare for and plan for. Code enforcement is also important. It's hard to be everywhere at all times, so perhaps increasing our personnel to address some code enforcement issues, whether it's building.
Thank you, Mrs. Downing.
Coronado has the most fiscally sound city in our region, and I would almost argue the state, because we don't spend more than we get. So each year, when we wound up having what we are calling a surplus, we have used that in the next year to either expand some of the capital improvement projects that were waiting to be funded, or this past year, we agreed to increase staff by 1 sworn police officer and 2 non-sworn police employees. So each year we get to look at that over and over again, and we've done that. One of the things I push for, though, is to help you get some more benefit from those wonderful buildings you built. So I held up approving the new operations plan for the Spreckle Center because we weren't going to have any buildings the citizens could use for free. We've had the Win Room for years. It works very well. Lots of groups use it. Why are we building all these beautiful buildings and you have to pay to use every single room? So the city went and looked at it, and so now we have a list of rooms that you will be able to use as a citizen for free. That's one of the ways you should get the money back that we have in excess. We don't need to keep collecting as much to use every room. We have enough in the budget to cover it. The other issue is we are working with the school. I've also pushed for joint use of the school facilities, which we paid for with our bonds and tax revenue, and we are going to be announcing officially in 2 weeks, but we have joint use. You will be able to use the new track now on the weekends, and that's because of an agreement we made with the school district, and we are helping to fund that. So although we cannot give funds to the schools, we can find ways to work together to help you benefit from your taxes.
Thank you, Mrs. Downing. Mr. Bailey?
The city of Coronado is the envy of many cities in the region. And the reason for that is because we consistently run budget surpluses. We have a AAA bond rating, one of only 9 government agencies in the entire state of California. And credit belongs to city staff and previous city councils for exercising fiscal restraint. In fact, we had 0 debt. The last time our debt service line was utilized was to pay off a copier in 2011. And that's how financially sound we are. We're still financially sound, but when I first got elected to the city council, I looked into, well, what can we do to actually lower the city's portion of your property tax rates and the city's portion of your sales tax rates? And the answer to that question is that the state actually sets a minimum, so we can't even lower your property tax rates or city tax rates, sales tax rates, if we wanted to. So since we can't lower your tax rates, what can we do? Well, it falls on us then to spend your money in the best way possible. And that's investing in our infrastructure, that's improving your quality of life, and that's maximizing the return on your taxpayer dollars so that we never have to be in a situation where we're asking you for more money. And one of the ways we have invested your dollars successfully is by prepaying our pension obligations. Right now, we have tens of millions of dollars sitting in the bank earning less than 1% interest. By prepaying the pension obligations that our city has, we're putting your money to work, and we're receiving a rate, on average, the projections are 5 to 7% a year. This reduces our future obligations, and it's a great investment for the taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Our second question is about the bridge. This question came from a resident within the past 24 hours, and indeed we have received several comments and questions over the past 24 hours. The resident wrote, "Last night the bridge was closed in both directions for nearly 2 hours due to a young man threatening to jump. Fortunately, he did not jump and was taken into protective custody. However, 381 lives have been lost due to bridge suicides, and it continues to impact drivers as well as those that witness these horrific events. If it wasn't for the Bridge Collaborative and public outcry, it seems like the city of Coronado doesn't make this a bigger issue because they don't have control of the bridge. Caltrans does. The question is this: What specifically will you do to fund or cut through the red tape if the residents of Coronado are demanding a safer bridge that does not get shut down periodically due to, quote, police activity? Mr. Bailey, we'll start with you and then go to Mrs. Down.
Thank you for the question. Obviously, it is a tragedy every time we lose a life on our bridge, and unfortunately, because of where we live, we're exposed to this far too often. I think the first step to attacking this problem is to actually be aware of it. And over the past few years, I think our community has become more aware of it because of Nixle. So every time there's a bridge closure, you actually receive a notification, and more often than not, unfortunately, the reason for the bridge closure is because there's someone up there on the bridge. I believe to date we've already lost 9 lives, and we've had a dozen more or so consider suicide on the bridge. So when you consider that, it's not just, though, a matter of the loss of life, as tragic as that is. It's the economic impact that the entire region suffers. So as far as cutting through the red tape, creating awareness is the first step, and then we're going to need to lobby our regional officials at the state level and at Sandag to really bring attention to this matter. I'm going to tell you guys a quick story in the amount of time I have left. There are 2 bridges over in the Washington, D.C. area, the Ellington Bridge and the Taft Bridge. They're just a stone's throw away from one another. They're about 125 feet off the ground, so each bridge, either bridge is fatal if you're to jump from it. The Ellington Bridge has a guardrail about the same height as the Coronado Bridge, so about waist height. The Taft Bridge has a railing that is about chest height. The Ellington Bridge is the bridge that became known as the suicide bridge. So a group of activists in the community got together, they petitioned their local government to erect a taller barrier, and they were successful in erecting it. A lot of the opponents said that those people contemplating suicide would simply move over to the Taft Bridge. What they found out was that that didn't happen. So when we're considering options, the net under the San Francisco Bridge is an estimated cost of $175 million. A barrier from your waist to your chest would likely be much cheaper. I think that's the solution we need to pursue.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mrs. Down.
When the Bridge Collaborative came to me a year ago, I helped them put together the proposals. I put them together with folks at the Sandag Service Bureau to figure out what they could do to have our bridge reviewed, what we could actually put on the bridge. Was it a net? Was it a fence? Well, it costs a lot of money to do any of the studies. So they started just a fundraising attempt to get $15,000 because we could get a package that they could then take to legislators or to the public to raise money. Unfortunately, that has not come to pass because now everybody really wants to have a true study, a feasibility study. So that's still pending because it's going to cost about $100,000 for that. But the problem is our bridge doesn't have any pedestrian access. So under the Caltrans rules, they don't feel compelled to put any protection from pedestrians. All the other overpasses Caltrans is in charge of, or in some of the bridges, as Mr. Bailey pointed out, there was a pedestrian place or a bike place, so there was a rule that said you had to make it a certain height. That's been our problem. So it's going to take an act of our legislature or 10 years of fundraising like it did up in San Francisco before somebody will admit that they have the obligation to do anything, a fence or a net. So it is important that the word is getting out, people are finding out more, but Caltrans does not believe it's their obligation. I would not suggest the city of Coronado step in because it's going to be tens of millions of dollars, but we need to keep raising the awareness so the state will indeed step in.
Thank you, Mrs. Downing. Mr. Benson.
You know, when this issue started surfacing in the last year, I was originally opposed to it just by gut instinct because our iconic bridge is so beautiful, and I thought, gosh, you know, what are we going to do to affect the way it looks? And then I started looking at the issue more and seeing how horrendous it really is. So I now believe we do have to do something. The question is, how are we going to do it? What are we going to do? And what we've learned is it's going to be very challenging. There's a lot of bureaucracy involved in it, but it is doable. It will cost a lot of money, but this is where relationships matter, understanding the different layers of bureaucracy from Coronado all the way up to the Capitol matter. I have an understanding of how different state relations work. We're going to need to work with our state assembly members, our state senators, to work with Caltrans to prioritize this issue. That's how it's going to get done. The city of Coronado, Port, it's going to be difficult for them to pony up for something like this. I have the support of a lot of legislators. I've worked with different folks in Sacramento. I believe that I can bring the right people together to begin the conversation to eventually put a wall, a net, something under the bridge, help save lives, but also there is a social economic impact to it. Just yesterday, it took me 2 hours to get over the bridge to pick up my girls. I had to rush to get someone to take care of them because they were at an after-school activity. So those are the kind of things also that are important, and we need to get on this, to address this issue quickly, but it's not going to happen quickly, unfortunately.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Mr. Donovan.
Yes, this is an issue that's just recently really escalated, in my opinion. I mean, we always knew there was a problem, but it's getting worse and worse. And it's not just the loss of life, but it's the impact on our city. You know, blocking the bridge yesterday for 2 hours. You know, just the traffic alone, the North Island and the Navy guys trying to get off. But this is a perfect example of an area where Coronado, even though it affects our city, we don't have total control over what happens on the bridge. It's Sandag and Caltrans and the port in some respect. So one thing I would say right off the bat is we need to address this before we do this port project to light up the bridge. I think that would be ridiculous if we did that without first addressing the suicide issue. We need to be collaborators. As I said, we're not the ones that are totally responsible. We don't have the final say. But I think we need to get the Navy on board because it definitely affects transportation to the Navy bases. So they're involved. We need to get Sandag on board. And I think we need to not only collaborate, but put together a detailed explanation of how it affects our city, how it affects the Navy, and how it affects our residents, and drive for some sort of approach to fully address this issue, because we have to do something.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Mr. Howard.
I'm not opposed to saving lives. Nobody is. When I was working in law enforcement, I responded to a lot of suicide calls in East County. We don't have bridges in East County. People still found a way to kill themselves. My understanding, my reading is people that don't jump off the bridge more than likely are going to try it another way. It might save a life that day, but doesn't mean that you stay at that life. It might just be taken to another location. As far as building the net bills, I'm in favor of building net, to be honest with you. I'd like to see the net bill. But my solution or proposal anyway would be reinstate the toll. You can't use the toll money for anything else except for maintaining that bridge. Maybe we can use that $100 million in order to reinstate the toll, use that toll money to build the net. It'll take probably 10, 15 years to pay that money back. So I have a toll set up, increase the traffic, increase the traffic into the city, and get a net bill at the same time. I think that would be a 2 for 1. Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Hauser. Mr. Hines.
We clearly need to do something to try to reduce the possibility of people committing suicide on our bridge. Some sort of obstacle needs to be put in place. I don't know if that's a net or a fence or what the right tool there is. And that's where we need to gather information and figure that out. But as some of the previous speakers have said, it's an interagency effort. It involves Caltrans, it involves the city of San Diego, it involves the city of Coronado, the Navy's going to be involved. And so we need people on our council that have interagency cooperation experience. That's what I do in my day job right now. I get agencies to work together defending the United States ports and harbors. And I work with state, local, other parts of the federal government, and the part of the federal government that I work for. And so we need people that have those skills, that can get people working together, get a common vision, and determine what we do to help make the bridge a safer place. If we make that bridge a safer place, we will have all the positive impacts that the previous speakers have spoken of, that reducing the effect on Coronado residents, on the economics, but most importantly, we can maybe save some lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Munt.
First of all, I want to say lives before lives. I think lives are a lot more important than life on our bridge. We have to bring that to the attention of Caltrans and Sandag and let them know, because it's a tragedy every time someone loses their life. No one likes to hear that. And it's also a tragedy to our city because some people are stuck in traffic for 2 or 3 hours. Like yesterday, they interrupted our complete city. You're at a complete gridlock for hours. Some of our safety officers couldn't respond because they were attending to the bridge. Rumor has it that there wasn't an ambulance available yesterday. And the only way to get medical treatment is you're going to have to go on a helicopter. And that's scary. And we have, I don't know if it's going to be a fence or a net. I think the net probably is going to be a very expensive cost. A fence could work. And like some people I've talked to yesterday in Europe, there's some bridges that have clear glass or plastic walls around the bridge. I know that might be hard to keep clean all the time, but you still keep your view. I don't know what the cost of it is, but we need to do something about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Muntz. Our next question for the evening is about tourism, and specifically the CTID. Again, I would like to offer some context. CTID stands for the Coronado Tourism Improvement District. The CTID was created in 2010 in response to lower hotel occupancy rates and decreasing local business revenue due to the 2008 recession. The mission statement of the CTID is, and I quote, "to promote Coronado as a year-round destination to visitors across the bridge and across the country while contributing to the vitality of the community." The CTID is funded by a 1% hotel tax that our 4 major hotels collect, and it is not paid for by Coronado taxpayers. Last year, it amounted to over $1.4 million in funds to market Coronado this year. The CTID pays for things such as the free summer shuttle along Orange Avenue. It is responsible for bringing swim teams to the aquatic center with those swimmers staying in our hotels. The CTID brings convention groups to the hotels and pays for the seasonal banners along Orange Avenue. The CTID also awards upwards of $20,000 in grants annually to help fund marketing efforts by local nonprofits. Past recipients include the Chamber of Commerce, Super Frog Race, Lambs Players, the Art Walk, and the Coronado Playhouse. However, advertising to San Diegans across the bridge has been met with opposition from some residents who argue that while residents don't financially pay for the CTID, they do pay for it in negative externalities, such as additional cars and traffic, overcrowding, and a strain on city services. The question the residents are asking is this: what is your rationale for keeping the CTID now that the recession has eased? And would you make any changes to the CTID if you choose to keep it? Mr. Hines, we will start with you, and then you'll move to your right to Mr. Hauser.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Tourism is a difficult challenge for us. We love the dollars the tourists bring, but we don't like the crowds and the traffic that they bring. The CTID in the past years has done some marketing locally, bringing tourists in the local area. That was done with the best of intentions to try to bring people here during the lower season in the winter. But there was some outcry here within the city, and the CTID now has promised they will not market locally. They'll market only to groups. Groups that come in here, stay in our hotels, eat in our restaurants, and spend money to keep our businesses strong. We like having the businesses on Orange Avenue, at least most of us do, I think. And if we didn't have some of those tourism dollars, some of them would have a difficult time staying in business. So we have to try to balance that. I think the CTID is focused appropriately now on trying to bring tourists to Coronado that are not going to have as much impact on the city. Things like the summer shuttle that they provide help reduce traffic. And some of the other good things that CTID is doing, I think, help us in general. We want tourism, we just need to focus on the appropriate tourism. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Hauser.
I agree. I think the Tourist Bureau does a great job under the direction of the City Council. My understanding, talking to, I think it's Todd White, he said that their concentration is to bring tourist business to San and through Coronado in the off-season, big conventions, more so than day visitors. That's an excellent idea. I was in the restaurant. I opened and operated a restaurant for about 2 years. I mean, 2 restaurants, very successful. And I was a manager of a high-volume water drugstore back in North Wisconsin. And yeah, the high-volume stores were very good. And I think I understand business. And I agree we need business. But business and community don't work together. There's no reason the Sprinkle Park concerts that we have every summer, they could be spread out. They don't have to be in the summertime. We're bringing a lot of traffic to the city. These people aren't spending money in the city. A lot of them are bringing food and they're not buying it at the local restaurant. They're not even residents. What we're doing is we're annoying the residents who live around the park with the dumpsters and the trash and the loud music for hours and hours at a time. It's not benefiting the residents of Coronado. I'd like to see it spread out during the year, perfect weather year round. Move the concerts. And I want to promote business. I think business is a big part of our second highest is tourism business. Everybody needs the taxes and that's the thing, all hotels and restaurants. So we don't want to do this. We have to promote it. It's not a direct control. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hauser. Mr. Donovan.
As Anne Marie mentioned, the CTID was started in 2010. It started with a half-cent tax in reaction to the recession. And as far as I can tell, the strategy was get as many people as possible in Coronado to support the businesses. And they were successful. So that caused a lot of congestion, a lot of overcrowding. But then again, in 2015, they asked, and the city council awarded them another half cent. So now they have a full 1 cent, 1%. These are the top 4 hotels in Coronado. And again, this year, they've got a $1.4 million budget. My sense is that that's a lot more money than we need to spend on marketing Coronado. Now, they're making a move in the right direction, I think, as has already been mentioned. We're going to stop advertising to local tourists. I mean, people are going to come over, they know Coronado, they're going to come over if they want to anyway, but we don't need to spend money marketing San Diego or Orange County. Particularly the people in our county, they come over, typically they bring their own food, they park by the beach, they don't use our shops, they don't eat in our restaurants, so they're not really adding anything to the economy of our city. So the CTID is moving in the right direction, spending their money, looking at bringing groups in. Those tend to have less of an impact on our city, and I think will be better for us in the long run.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan.
Thank you. Well, we sure have a love-hate relationship with our tourists, don't we? Got passionate nickname for them like Zonies, whatever it may be. But the fact of the matter is they are clogging our beaches in the summer and our streets, but they benefit our local businesses who are owned by a lot of our own, owned by a lot of our residents, whether it's Tartines, whether it's Leroy's, whether it's the Coronado Brewing Company. These are Coronado families that live here, and they depend on robust patrons coming in all year long to help them. So we got to be aware of that, conscious of that, and help these folks stay in business. CTID is aiming to do that. Good news is we have an ability as a council to help manage them, nudge them, manage their $1.4 million spending plan. So if we decide that is too much, we can work with them to shrink it. It seems to be working adequately now, but that's something we can always address, because that's true. The recession's over, but we do need to come behind our locally owned business, because a lot of these folks are our neighbors. Then I would close by also making clear, San Diego County, the population has exploded. It's continuing to explode. People are going to be coming to our beautiful beach, whether we like it or not. We can't close the bridge. We can't stop them from coming. So we've got to work with them. We've got to manage them. So I think kind of the catchphrase we should start thinking about is tourism management. What are we going to be doing to manage some of these folks coming? Because whether we market to them or not, I think people are coming to our beautiful town just like we all do. So that's my plan. We've got a bird dog CTID, work with them closely to manage tourism. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dana.
I agree with Mr. Benzian. We are now in a mode of managing our tourists. The CTID has made a pivot. They are now advertising solely to out-of-town conventioners. Those are the folks flying in on the plane so that they aren't driving. But we have requested their help, and they've willingly given it to help promote the summer shuttle. It's one of my goals, and we talked about earlier, if we have more surplus each year, to expand that year-round with some of that money from CTID. If they help us manage tourists year-round, then that's one of the best uses of that revenue. We want to get the tourists that keep our restaurants, our local small stores open, but we need to figure out what is the impact to you. And it's parking, and it's not being able to drive where you want to because our roads are clogged. So we need to focus not only where their money goes to out-of-town convention, but also the money they spend in town to help us manage those tourists that are arriving. And they have done an excellent job to stepping up. They've agreed to our requests, and they're helping us manage not just the tourists that know about us because they live across the bay, but the internet has caused everybody to be in the tourist industry. I mean, I appreciate E-Coronado putting this on, but E-Coronado lets everybody know every week all the great things going on in Coronado. We can't stop them from seeing it. We have an amazing visitor center. The Chamber of Commerce has a webpage. So all the secrets we used to have aren't secret anymore, folks. So we now have to change and figure out how to manage them. And CTID actually can help us.
I'm going to jump in here. Mrs. Downey, if I could just clarify, so as the CTID said it is stopping all local advertising?
The city requested they do that. We did require it. There was a chance to require it. We did not do that, but they have reported that they have in their last report to the city.
Thank you. Mr. Bader.
Well, tourism certainly has a role to play in our community. It allows our businesses to stay open year-round because of the busy summer months. It helps keep our property tax rates and our sales tax rate low. and it also accounts for about 25% of the general fund revenue that we receive. So there is a benefit to residents. Now, CTID was started back in 2010, and really its primary charter back then was more focused on attracting day trippers than it is today. And of course, they've made a pivot to start attracting more business conventions. But what does that actually mean for you? Well, there's 2 days I want you to keep in mind. February 4th and July 4th. On July 4th, we all know what the impact is, right? We all have the day trippers over here, the types of tourists that will bring their cars and leave their trash. And then we have the tourists on February 4th that will fly in for their business convention, take a charter bus over to Coronado, and then they will patronize all of our businesses on foot. You don't feel their impact as much. That's the direction we should have been heading from the very beginning, and that's the direction that I think we should continue to head for the next 4 years.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mr. Munn.
Well, I think the CTID, you should have it in writing that they can't advertise locally. I want to see it in writing. It is a good group. When you advertise nationally and bring people to our hotels, that increases our TOT tax. That's the second biggest source of revenue in Coronado, tax revenue. The people that don't spend money here are the people that are day trippers. They come over, they bring their own food, they go to the beach. They end up actually costing us money because they pollute the beach. We have to clean that up. They take up traffic, or parking spots, they increase the traffic. You know, our city is almost at max capacity. We don't need these people coming over here every day. But the people that come here on vacation, they go out just like I do. I go out to dinner every night when I go on vacation. I go to the stores, I buy gift packs. I spend money in that community. And those are the people that we should be advertising for. And I think that's what we're doing now. I think that's a great direction to go in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Munn. Our next question, or our next two issues actually, will address housing and development. The Coronado General Plan states, and I quote, "It is the fundamental goal of the Coronado City Council to preserve and improve Coronado primarily as a beautiful, pleasant residential community in which to live, work, shop, and pursue leisure time activities." The first question in this category is about short-term rentals. If you were voting today, would you reduce the minimum 26-day rental period? If yes, how would you address residents' concerns of disruption and noise due to the short-term rentals? And if no, how would you better police homeowners who violate the 26-day minimum? Mrs. Downing, we will start with you.
I would not reduce the 26 days, but I actually want to find better ways to address the impact on you. I think we need to have homeowners register as a business. If they're going to rent out their home for 26 days, just so we know who's in charge. So when they go off, there's somebody we can call if there's a problem with their tenants. Likewise, if they had a renter come in that came and parked their cars in the garage, we wouldn't really care who's sleeping in the bed next to us because they're not taking up the parking. And if they're not having loud parties, what difference does it make? The problem is right now, none of those things are true. People put all their stuff in the garage so they can rent out their house, and I understand some people need to make money to help them pay their bills. I just don't want them to do that in a way that infringes on their neighbor's right to enjoy their property. So I think we need to, as a community, look for ways in helping to prevent that, such as if you have to car parking, you have to provide that to the people that rent your home. If you register your name and phone number, the city and your neighbors have a way to reach you if your tenant is misbehaving, if they're having loud parties or trashing the block. And then we can look at, do we want to have limits on how many people can be in the home? Because a lot of the problem is they're rented out to large groups that have 4 and 5 cars. Maybe there should be a limit, how many people per home. So I think those are ways we can address the impact of the community, but not infringe on homeowners' rights should they rent it out. But it shouldn't be less than 26 days.
Thank you, Mrs. Downing. Mr. Benson, we'll go to you next.
Great. So just so everyone's clear, Airbnb is generally used a couple days here and there, right? 2 or 3 days, 3 or 4 days, and then we have our 26-day policy. So I flat out oppose Airbnb being able to, one being able to use Airbnb for 2 or 3 days at a time. I think that's going to turn our community into a little mini hotel. We don't want that. It affects the TOT revenue of our hotels. But I do think it's probably worth examining the 26-day policy. Seems to me people are breaking it left and right, from what I can tell. I don't think it's good public policy to have a policy that your citizens aren't using. I know a lot of people in town on fixed incomes, they want to rent their house out for maybe 3 weeks, or 6 weeks. Not a lot of people can rent a house for 26 days. I think it's valuable to really I think we almost need a survey to gauge the city's interest. I know hundreds of people who are renting their homes out, and they're not trying to do it all the time. They just want to do it maybe 1 month a year. But to get 26 days is hard. So maybe we need to look at 21 days, or maybe maybe the community would say we need it to be larger. But we need a better understanding of where people lie. I'm willing to explore that, but for the record, I am opposed to Airbnb. Open to discussing 21-day policy. I don't think we want to go anything less than that because it's going to turn our town into many hotels, like I said.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Mr. Donovan.
My view is we don't need to focus on the 26 days. We need to focus on enforcing the rules that are in place right now. These short-term renters that are coming in kind of ruin the fabric of the neighborhood. This is a classic example, in my opinion, of the technology getting out ahead of the bureaucracy or the government. The Airbnb and the VPRO or whatever the other one is, I mean, if you go on there today, you'll find people in Coronado advertising their homes for less than 26 days. So I think we need to benchmark some of the other beach towns. You know, Lori Zapp, who's a city council member for San Diego, who covers the beach communities, Ocean Beach, Mission Beach, Pacific Beach, she announced a couple of months ago that she's having her staff look into this very problem over there in her area. And other cities in other parts of the country, mostly beach cities, because we're the main ones that are impacted, are doing things like if you're going to rent your house out short term, you have to register with the city, you have to pay the transient occupancy tax, you have to, if you want to do short term rentals, you have to actually live in your house for a certain period of time during the year. So these are just some examples of things that we should look at, and again, to also figure out how to really enforce the municipal code that's in place right now.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Mr. Howard.
I understand that some people trying to get some extra money want to rent out a room in their house for a short period of time. But there's a large percentage of people in the community, especially the ones in Coronado, that's a permanent source of income from. They're not living there, they're renting this out year round. If they're not paying taxes, the community doesn't benefit the slightest from it. All you're doing is increasing the cost of the infrastructure in Coronado by having the extra cost for traffic. There's more flies, Pacific Beach has flies. There's double the trash pickup because of our short-term rentals. You have more rats. Coronado has more rat problem, more vector control problems in Coronado than the other city in the county. You can't rely on your neighbor to report that your neighbor is using their property for 26 days. There's got to be a better way of doing that. I don't want to report on my neighbor. I live with my neighbor. I don't want to have a problem with my neighbor. So the city's going to have to monitor that, not the neighbor to monitor it. I don't see any benefit to the community and having rentals. 26 days, that's fine. I wouldn't go down to 21 days. I don't see any benefit for that. Some people are looking for income property. If you want income property, sell your property here, buy it someplace else. I moved here because I'm looking for residents, not for a bed and breakfast community. I want to live with community residents, not short-term rentals. So if you're looking for income property, you want to live in this community, sell your property here, make a nice property. Buy property someplace else, sell it from your house here. Somebody who wants to live here is a resident of a very nice residential community.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Mr. Hines.
This question is about maintaining the residential character of our community. And the 26-day number is a number, I don't think we need to change that, but I'm willing to look at data if there's a reason to. But we need to keep a significant period of time for all the problems that have been stated with people coming and going all the time. They reduce the residential character of the area and reduce the pleasure of us living in this community. So right now, the policy of our police department is they enforce this 26-day limit by complaint. And so it's partly upon us as citizens to inform the police when we see problems. Maybe that's not the only answer we should have, though. Maybe we should be looking at these websites and those kinds of places and inquiring when we see advertisements that look short of that period. Sending the police officer around and checking on that. I don't think we want them knocking on every door, but if there's evidence that we find in a public forum like a website, we ought to inquire about that and do a little more proactive policing of this limit. This limit is important to keeping the residential nature of our community. And I think if we get it lower, we're going to have problems with people turning over. There is the idea of people operating a business without a license. That concerns me. And that we're sacrificing the taxes that all our hotels pay in town that these businesses are not paying. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Munn.
I think the 26 days is a good number. I definitely don't want to decrease that number. Like people have said, the TOT tax is the biggest tax revenue, that second biggest tax revenue that we get in Coronado. And that takes away from that. That takes away from all of us. What we have, when I talked to the assistant city manager, and we actually have an intern working now at City Hall, who, all she does is go through websites. She goes through websites and to see how long the rentals are for, if they're for 5 days, if they're for 7 days. And I think that's a great step, especially an intern, we don't pay them. So that benefits us, the company. The process is, yeah, let's give them a phone call, tell them that it's illegal. Second time, have the city attorney write them a letter. You get a letter from an attorney, you're like, okay, this is serious, you know. But the problem at the end is, if you do follow through, I think the penalty is only about $100. When you're renting something out for 2 weeks and you're making $10,000, $15,000, $100 is the cost of business. We probably need to increase the penalty, and we need to work as a community to let our city know that these rentals are taking place, because this is one of those things where we have to call in and do it. But if we work as a community, a great community of Coronado, we can get this done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Munn. Mr. Bailey.
Well, this is actually one of the very few codes that we proactively enforce. As Derek mentioned, we do have an intern down at City Hall that scours Airbnb and other similar sites. But here's another secret. It is not illegal to advertise your home for less than 26 days. It's your First Amendment right. It is illegal to actually rent out your home for less than 26 days. That's what the rub is. The other secret, as Derek already told you, is that your first fine is only $100. And that is just the cost of doing business. And we as a city, unlike the city of San Diego, which is a charter city, we as a general law city simply don't have the authority to ever assess you a fine that makes you think twice about whether or not to follow our laws. So, recognizing the bind the city was in, I contacted representatives at Airbnb, and they actually flew down to the city of Coronado, and we had a meeting with their representatives and our city leadership. And I have to say, I was really impressed with Airbnb because they have over 2 million listings worldwide. 2 million listings worldwide. They have 80 here in Coronado, but they actually made a trip down here just for us because they are committed to being good partners in our community. Because they recognize that their business can only be successful when they are respectful of our neighborhoods. So the outcome of that meeting was that they made us aware of a tool. It's a neighborhood policy tool. It's a neighborhood online tool where any one of us from the city or out in the public can go online and report one of their users who's violating either the city ordinance or violating neighborhood standards, and they will remove that person from their website. So that's probably in the short term, the best possible solution.
Time.
And I'll leave it all in suspense for the long term.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. The second question in this category about housing is about RCIP 3. Again, some context. RCIP, which stands for the Residential Standards Improvement Program, came into place via the Planning Commission to ensure that Coronado maintains its residential character. Our RCIP committee reviews building codes and makes recommendations to council about architectural restrictions on housing projects and home remodels to ensure that the city maintains its residential character while balancing property owners' rights. A few weeks ago, the City Council approved the third level of improvements, known as RCIP 3. Candidates, what part of RCIP 3 do you believe will be the most effective in maintaining our village-like community? And are you anticipating an RCIP 4? Why or why not? Mr. Hauser, we will start with you and then move to your right, to Mr. Butler.
Yeah, the city of Coronado is already pretty much built out. 25,000 people here, about 10,000 residents. I understand we have to, there's state mandates that you have to comply with that city urban housing regulations. We do that. We're in compliance right now, from my understanding. We don't have to increase the multifamily housing anymore. So if there's going to be a change, if somebody's going to try to tear down a small residential property, this property out in a residential area, you can't do that without going through the design and dealing with the multifamily house side. If you can rebuild in those that are already designated for multi-housing zone. So I wouldn't want to see that increased. I don't want to see it reduced. I want to have it stay exactly where it is. Like a problem with height restrictions, like space restrictions. You don't want to hold a building next to you or you're using on the bike and your air circulation and everything else. You put them on a monstrosity home next to your little bungalow. That's not in the best interest of the neighbor. It's not in the best interest of the community. So I wouldn't expand existing multifamily homing zoning areas. If at all possible, I restrict it to the more it is. Keep the residential homes where they are. I like the idea of small conventions, no more than two small homes. I think it is really nice.
Thank you so much. Mr. Donovan?
Yes, I think the RSIP committee did an outstanding job. I mean, it was a committee that had a cross-section of people in the building industry, real estate, some residents at large. They did a lot of horse trading, a lot of compromising, and they came up with 25 really good changes to the code. And my favorites are there's more design review, and I know this drove the developers crazy, but this gives the neighbors a chance to, if you're going to max out your floor area ratio, you have to go to design review in most cases, not always, but in most cases. So this gives the neighbors an opportunity to put their 2 cents in. It reduced the height limit for R3 zones. It provided for, rather than having a straight wall up just inside the setback, which for narrow lots is only 3 feet, now they're required, at least on the second story, to have some slope, have a roof line, so it doesn't impact your view and your light plane as much. We always had requirement for 2 parking spots, but 2 enclosed spots, most people use their garage for storage. Now they're requiring 1 open spot, so now people hopefully will park their cars there. And I do envision an RSIP 4. RSIP 3 really concentrated on R3 zones, and I think we need to do the same thing for the R1A and R1B single-family residential areas.
So as a way of background a little bit, the City of Coronado has a general plan mandated by the state of California. It has a number of elements in it, one of which is a housing element. The housing element is the only element in our general plan that has to be approved by the state of California. So they're never going to get behind us rezoning or changing R3 or anything like that, because state law asks for a diversification of zoning within a city to allow young people, old folks, less wealthy people to live in a community. So that's good background to understand kind of general zoning in Coronado, why we can't just get rid of a certain type of zoning. But we also can't allow Coronado to turn into Balboa Island. We need to fight for our historical homes that bring a lot of character and charm to our town. That's one of the main reasons I'm running, is to preserve some of those great homes. I grew up in an Irving Gill home over in Star Park Circle. That's to me one of the great architects of Coronado, not San Diego. So then to get specific to answer your question, will we see an RSIP 4? To quote our current mayor at the last meeting when they approved it, probably yes. But that's because we don't know what RSIP 3 is going to do. The committee worked really hard. I approve of most of the changes, not all the changes they made, but we don't know. For the next few years, we're going to see the buildings produce and see how they turn out. So we may have to, unfortunately, come back and re-examine our buildings. I'm just trying to think if I answered all your questions. Diane, closely as well as I could have.
I agree that our SIP3 recommendations were wonderful. Several of them were ones that I proposed earlier on, recommendations we got from builders and community residents, such as the unenclosed parking spot. As I mentioned earlier, the reason we feel crowded, the reason we feel all the tourists, is we can't park anywhere, whether it's downtown or on our streets. So the new rule requires that any time you had to have 2 enclosed, 1 of those will now be enclosed, and 1 is either mandatory, it has to be enclosed, or optional. And the reason we're going to have an RSIP 4 is because every time we do one of these RSIP rule changes, we don't always see what the unforeseen consequences are going to be. And so we'll fix them after we've had a year or 2 of developers realizing, I know you wanted this, but I can't do it because you said this over here. So we're going to have a chance to look at that. But one of the things that hasn't been mentioned before, in addition to lowering the height, in addition to the unenclosed parking and the daylight savings, we actually found a way to encourage single story. Because that's what really a lot of people would like. They would like us not to have 2-story, and then it really doesn't matter what's on the first story because you can't see into the neighbor's house. We don't know if it's enough of incentive. Both Councilman Bailey and I were trying to find a way to make it more. We were told this time around it's as big as it could be, but maybe after a year and a half, we'll find out we can do more to encourage more single-story development. So I support all the changes, but I disagree with an earlier speaker. We actually made many of them apply to the RIA zones. So I did a chart to help our realtors and our construction workers understand which applied to which zone. Most of these changes do apply across the board.
Since 1980, the size of allowable new home construction has actually been reduced by about 40%. The floor area ratio from 1980 to today has been reduced by about 40%. But it doesn't always feel like that, and why is that? Previous RCIPs, although they were well-intended, and I think they made tremendous strides in this area, they actually forced some of the construction to move forward onto the lot. So it didn't actually reduce the appearance of bulk and mass, although the size of the entire home had in fact been reduced. In terms of the handful of areas that I think RCIP 3 made additional strides, as Ms. Downey mentioned, requiring an uncovered parking space, I think that is something that we should have been doing many years ago. It would probably mitigate our current parking congestion. And also increasing the incentive for having a single-story home. And right now on our larger lots, which are oftentimes pointed at as examples of areas where we're losing our village character, well, those larger lots, we could afford to allow them to have even larger floor area ratios so long as they kept their home on a single story. And so we could provide them with an additional incentive. Whether or not we're going to have RCIP 4, this is I think it's very likely that we may have some cleanup measures that come about from RCIP 3 because we don't know what the consequences are going to be. There were some unintended consequences with RCIP 1 and 2 that required additional cleanup language, so there will very likely be additional cleanup language necessary for RCIP 3. I think generally speaking, we need to make sure that our housing policies are protecting our village atmosphere, but we also want to be careful that we don't make housing less affordable than REAs.
Time. Mr. Money.
RCIP 3 is a great step. The committee worked really hard and worked for a long time. The height restrictions are great. The unenclosed parking space is amazing. Because I don't know too many people in Coronado actually use the garage or the parking. Enclosed parking. So you can't just store stuff there. You actually have to put a car. That's a really good idea. You have a parking problem in Coronado. The biggest thing is I talk to a lot of people and they feel like Coronado is being overdeveloped. And some of the people I've talked to, and this is why I like the one-story house option. It's great. It doesn't intrude into your neighbor's yard. But I've talked to a lot of people lately, and these are people that have lived here for 50 and 60 years. And they come to me and they tell me, you know what, I'm leaving Coronado. I don't want to live here anymore. Because they're losing their heritage. And they don't feel like Coronado is their community anymore. So that's something we need to work on. So we're going to sit back, we'll watch RCIP 3, see how it does. We'll probably need an RCIP 4, but we need to keep on top of it. We need to keep going until it's perfect. Thank you very much.
There's 3 people on the stage that are on the record on RCIP 3. The 2 current councilmen when they voted for it on council, and myself when I voted for it on the planning commission. So you know that we all support RCIP 3. I think it's a step in the right direction. I don't think it's perfect. If you look at the point tables for the different assignment of functions there, they're not precisely done. We think they're going to drive a reaction, but we don't know that for sure. So we may have to do some cleanup, as was said earlier, in the future in order to get the desired result. We are reducing the bulk and mass of the houses. We are creating the daylight planes to hopefully reduce impact on neighboring homes. So this is all good. But using my architecture education, as I dove into this in the Planning Commission, I didn't get the answers that I wanted on the numbers and how these numbers work. But because it's going the right direction, I support it. And I think that we will end up having to tweak it a little bit down the line, and we may end up having to even reduce the areas a little more. But this is balancing property rights with our community character. We want to make sure we don't make a radical move either way. This gradual change we've been at over the last 20 years, I think is the right thing for trying to maintain our village character. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be the little cottages that we had, but we can at least keep it in a reasonable manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. This next question is about Vision Zero and the possibility of the City of Coronado obtaining ownership and responsibility for 3rd and 4th Streets and Orange Avenue. I'd like to offer some context. Some would like Coronado to adopt the policy of Vision Zero. Vision Zero is a multinational project that commits cities to planning and designing their roads and pedestrian walkways with zero tolerance for pedestrian deaths. The City of Los Angeles has already adopted Vision Zero, and San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer has announced his support for Vision Zero. In Coronado, currently, Caltrans, the California Department of Transportation, controls 3rd and 4th Streets and Orange Avenue as state routes 282 and 75. There has been much community discussion, sometimes passionately, about the City of Coronado taking control of these roadways to reduce traffic and noise and to save lives. It should be noted that Imperial Beach is moving forward with taking back their section of State Route 75, Palm Avenue. And in order to do this, Imperial Beach has had to get approval from the California State Legislature. So candidates, there are two parts to this question. What do you see as the pros and cons of taking the state routes back, specifically 3rd and 4th and Orange Avenue? And secondly, do you support actively petitioning Caltrans in the state to get relinquishment going forward in Coronado? Mr. Benzian, we will start with you and move to your left.
Okay, great. So this is a complicated question because local control is, in my opinion, always the best path forward. So it would be terrific to have full control of State Route 75. But it comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot of liability and a lot of cost. So what the first thing we need to do is we need to ask Caltrans for their feasibility analysis. Essentially, it's a cost-benefit analysis of what they're spending on the repairs, liabilities, maintenance. Once we get that, we'll be able to have a better understanding of what we'd be in for if we went forward. But I think it's important, so that's the first step, but I think it's also important to understand where this is going. I actually helped the city of San Diego about 10 years ago when they started discussing relinquishment on their portion of 75, which is down on Palm towards the 5, past Imperial Beach. So I know the issue really well and the stakeholders involved and how difficult it can be. We've got to understand that not only is the city of Imperial Beach going forward with relinquishment, so is the city of San Diego, as far as I understand, because there's a Senate bill by Tony Atkins who's floating the bill, and so they're acting on it. They're going to take it back. The point of a state route is to create fluidity and accessibility for the state's residents and citizens to get to and fro. So I don't think the state of California is going to want a road that dead ends at Imperial Beach. So what would they do? Perhaps they'll force it down our throat and require that we take back responsibility for it, and we're left with no way to pay for it. Whereas now, if we go forward, we can at least be at a strong negotiating point and try and get some resources from the state to manage it. This is speculative, to be sure, but it's something we need to be proactive about.
Mr. Dunn.
Well, first I want to say the amount of highway that Imperial Beach is talking about taking over is 1.5 miles down in their main drag. Coronado's got a much bigger, it's a much bigger deal for Coronado when we're talking about 3rd and 4th Street and Orange Avenue, at least down to the Antwerp base. There's some people that insist that now's the time we should take over these streets. Other people say, no, we shouldn't do it. My position is we don't know enough to know what the decision is. We need a detailed analysis of what the pros and cons are. So some of the cons are, as already been mentioned, is the liability cost, the maintenance cost. But I submit that there's some indirect costs as well. You know, Caltrans is a big organization. They have a legal staff. They have a staff of highway engineers. We don't have that. So there's going to be some additional costs if we take over those streets that we probably don't understand at this point. I'm not a big study guy. I don't like to throw money around doing studies, but in this case, this is such an important decision. I would advocate not only getting the Caltrans evaluation, but hire a third-party disinterested consultant to come in and tell us what the true costs are going to be. And by the way, tell us what we can do if we take over the streets. Just because we have control of the streets doesn't mean we're going to be able to do whatever we want. So we need to go into this with our eyes open and make a fact-based decision before we decide whether we're going to take these streets over or not.
Mr. Hauser.
It comes down to the cost, like most things do. Numbers have been floating around over 200. This is coming from contracts. Numbers floating around was $220,000. The maintenance, $100,000 for liability expenses over a 5-year period. Now, these are the numbers that they're giving us, and that's at the level that they're maintaining the highways right now, which people in Coronado are not happy with. If we do take over the streets and their numbers are anything close to correct, we're not going to be happy with that, so we're going to have to spend more money. and the numbers that they're giving us right now. So the question is, how much more money are we willing to spend, and what are we going to spend that money on? What's going to be the priority? And after meeting down there by the K's, we're very, very nice. Caltrans doesn't take care of it. We took care of it. We're trying to do a better job of looking a lot nicer. Maintaining the streets a lot better. But there's going to be limits that we can do as far as county traffic. There's still mandates from the state to say what you can do on state highway. So if we take over the highways, there's surely big restrictions and we have to comply with it. We can probably work better with the Navy because right now, Navy works through Caltrans and we just, isn't no party. So it'll give us some more benefit, more leverage with the Navy working with them. And I've heard numbers floating around that the Caltrans will give us money up front, maybe $20 million if we take it over. So if we're going to take it, we're going to get money, we're going to have to do it anyway. We better do it, we still have some money. But now maybe we'll splash the pots.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt.
As with most of the questions that we're discussing this evening, this is about having all the information. And in order to make a good decision on a city council, you need to have all the information, you need to have all the data so you can make good decisions. So we do need to gather more information. The cost data that Caltrans is providing, that's probably not the right data. The roads aren't where we want them now. There are some hidden structural issues in these roads. The underlayment, the bedrock of them is not good in some cases. It may be some major rework required. We need to make sure we know what all those liabilities are before we go into spending our money. If we were to take over the roads, we might have more control. We wouldn't have to deal with Caltrans, but they are still state highways. We still would have limitations on what we could do, and there's still regulations that apply to what we could do. So we might not have as much control as we thought, and so we need to make sure we understand that before we make a decision that commits the city to this liability. The other thing is in a major disaster. If the roads get torn up, would we get any help from the state? Would we get aid in repairing these roads? We want to know that before we take responsibility for them. And so it's a matter of getting all the right data so we can make a good, rational decision with that data and with citizen input. Thank you.
Mr. Bundy.
Well, like a lot of people said, relinquishment from 282 and 75, the first thing you need to do is get a PSR. It's a project study report. It's free, it comes from Caltrans. I know some numbers are floating around at $220,000 for 5 years of maintenance and liability. I don't think the numbers are anywhere close to that because you would actually take care of our streets. You wouldn't see overgrown brush and garbage everywhere. You'd actually see clean streets. So that would be a benefit, if we took it. But the cost would be a lot more than $220,000 for 5 years. If we do take back these streets, we still don't know what we're allowed to do on 282 and 75. Are we allowed to put boulevards or raised walkway or crosswalks? We don't know. And that's another study we need to do. But if we do get it back and it is in our budget, I think it could be great. Because like I said, we would have more say. I don't know how much say, but more say. Because we have a traffic problem in Coronado. Everyone knows it. That's the first question people ask me. What are you going to do about traffic? And I think this is the number one thing we need to do first. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bailey.
This question started off with asking us about our policies on reducing accidents on our street and setting the goal that we will have a zero tolerance policy for pedestrian, cyclists, and auto accidents. And I think that's a noble goal, but I think it's all talk and we don't have the ability to actually act on it when we don't have control over our local streets. Now, that brings us to the pros of relinquishment, local control, the possibilities of actually being able to implement more crosswalks, bulb-outs, and speed bumps, but of course, we don't know if we can actually do that yet. The cons associated with this are the increased costs, which, when you consider that just the amount of money Caltrans is currently spending on it and how healthy our financial reserves are, chances are that we could absorb much of the maintenance costs associated with these streets. But once again, we don't know for sure. Now, there's an old saying in politics that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And one of the benefits, one of the additional pros that Imperial Beach was able to realize was that because they came to Caltrans and negotiated, they were able to receive several million dollars in compensation for receiving their stretch of the highway. And so if I am elected your next mayor, this is a question that I will be asking the city council to consider, to bring up. We need this information, we need to approach Caltrans, and we need to be asking the right questions, because I would hate to wake up one day and have Caltrans just dump these roads right on our lap, and that is exactly what they're trying to do through the state legislature.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mrs. Down.
Imperial Beach has been working on this for more than 5 years. They asked for the PLR that Mr. Mike brought up because they had a local control issue. It was costing them too much money to go to Caltrans every time their stores needed a permit on that 1.5 mile stretch. So they had a goal. They knew what they wanted to get, and legally they knew they could get that. If they got their road, they wouldn't have to pay Caltrans permits. They didn't need or want any traffic control. So first, Coronado has to figure out what we want. We all know we want a safer street. We want to be able to implement things. But what we found out as we started talking to Caltrans when our representative came to us saying this proposal was being put forth, we hadn't yet figured out what we wanted. We don't know the state of the roads, we don't know what they cost, and I surmised at the time, I don't think we know who's in control. It turns out Caltrans did their own study. It's not a PLR, they looked at what it would take to turn it over to us. They found out they don't even own a significant amount of Route 75. Turns out they have a lease to the federal government. The federal government owned it when they built the radio receiving station and then when they built NAB. So even if we were to get it, we still wouldn't have control. So everybody on the council is more than willing to spend money to get control. But first we need to figure out what is our goal. So we already directed our city attorney, and if need be a third party, to help us figure out what options are there depending on who owns the land. Thank you.
Yeah. The next question comes from residents in the Caves. This is what they have posed to you. The Strand traffic from the Coronado Caves to the village has been absolutely horrible over the past few weeks. Morning commutes to village schools or Navy bases that should take 15 minutes are taking over 45 minutes. It appears that social media or getting traditional media involved is the quickest way to get city officials to respond. Residents are extremely frustrated, to say the least. The question is this: how are you going to cut through the Caltrans red tape to make fixes and ensure that you represent all the residents of Coronado, especially those down on the Strand? Mr. Donovan, we'll start with you and move to your right.
It appears that the issue that's come up in the last few months, southbound traffic coming up State Route 75 and Strand, it looks like the majority of that impact is coming from the light synchronization. And I understand, talking to Ms. Downey earlier, she's been involved as well, that there may also be an issue with a pedestrian crossing, that every time the light changes, the pedestrian crossing kicks in and it adds another 20 or 30 seconds to the cycle. I think there's probably at least one more element in this. I drive by there in the morning. My wife and I take our dogs down to the dog park in the Caves. And I always look over there. And to me, one of the problems is that the main gate on the Anfield base only has one lane entering in the morning. And not only is it only one lane, but it's being fed from both northbound and southbound traffic. So they're all coming together. I talked to West Bombier a couple of days ago when this all started to flare up. And I asked him, why is that? And why is there was another gate to the south of the main gate that's apparently a truck gate, but the cars aren't using it. So he said, well, yeah, the cars could use that gate if they want to. I drove by there again this morning and they're still not using it. I asked him if they could, for example, take one of the exit lanes and during the rush hour, make that an entry lane.
Time.
Okay. I'll try to give a quick answer because I'm not a traffic engineer, but this issue did come to my attention actually just earlier this week when I was meeting with a resident in the Caves, and he said, do you know where the worst traffic in Coronado is? And I said, well, this is a trick question, and I said, it kind of depends where you live in town. For me, it's over by 1st Street in the afternoon when I'm trying to pick up my kids. He said, got frustrated. He said, no, it's right here on the Strand. And I said, apologize, I didn't realize that. And he talked about the light synchronization issues and a couple of other reasons that he thinks we're having this big problem, especially of late. So I don't have a silver bullet for that right now. Something I certainly think it's worth looking into. But again, it just comes down to partnerships and working well with our bureaucracies like Caltrans. Sometimes you have to go just a step higher instead of working with the local staff and writing a letter or having a meeting with a low-level bureaucrat. You need to talk to your legislators. We need to talk to the assembly members and state senators that represent us. I have some of those relationships and I know how to work with those folks. in my past career. So I think that's something that I would look into. Pull the lever a little bit. They always tell me they're trying to work with Coronado a little bit better and they want to build better relationships. Let's start that now.
This issue has been brewing for a while. There's actually progress being made. We asked Caltrans if the city of Coronado could just put a police officer and start directing it so we didn't have the problems with the long lines from the pedestrians stopping traffic. It turns out they were initially willing to let the Coronado police do that. They said first, though, they want to send their traffic engineers to figure out what was wrong with the light synchronization so that we could get a permanent change in the program. That happened this morning. It is definitely part of a three-light sequence, and the problem is they can't get them to synchronize because there's a pedestrian override on the other side. So a meeting has been set up next week with Caltrans, the city of Coronado, and the Navy, because the problem is that light is for Navy personnel to go back and forth across the highway. And so trying to shut that off completely is going to be a problem on that side. So I don't know what the resolution is, but it is being worked on. Part of the issue is the real solution is to change the entry at NAB, but whether the military would be willing to pay for that is skeptical, because as soon as they get the coastal campus finished down in Imperial Beach, a large number of the people that are currently going to the FA base will be going down there. So they are required to look at traffic again as part of their development of the coastal campus, and Coronado will continue then to make them look at the entire Strand Highway and how all the bases work together.
You know, I think the previous candidates really just cover all that needs to be covered on this topic. Ms. Downey gave an excellent synopsis of where we're at today. I do want to point out that I think the reason this has received a lot of attention, especially lately, is because of social media and your ability to reach out to any one of us individually who's on Facebook or who's available online, to make us aware of a problem and have our council members do our best to act as a liaison on your behalf, to reach out to the respective agencies that are required to solve the problem. So I applaud Ms. Downey, I applaud the candidates for addressing this issue, but I don't see any reason to beat a dead horse.
I was handing the notes, so I lost my place. Has everyone had a chance to answer that too? Mr. Hunt?
Well, they all answered pretty well. I like the information I got from Carrie today, because I wasn't aware of that, but that's good that they're making progress. I know it's a synchronization problem, and I'm not a traffic engineer. It's something that I can't figure out on my own. But that's why we have good people around you. You find the experts to do it for you. When that South Bay base opens up, it's going to be a lot worse. You're going to have more cars going on the same street. So this is something we have to do a preventative measure to make sure it doesn't increase in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hines?
As a Cage resident, I don't need anyone to tell me there's a problem in the Strand. I have to live it every morning going to work. And it's not something that's just come up in the last couple of weeks. It has been very bad in the last couple of weeks, which has gotten a lot of attention. But we've had this problem off and on for a couple of years. And it usually does come down to those traffic lights. Every time a complaint is made and some tweaks made on that light, the problem diminishes for a period of time. And then something happens and it changes and we get back to having backups that go 5 and 6 miles down the Strand. I mean, I live in the Cage and I see the cars parked in front of me on 75 in the morning. That's something we've got to try to fix. So I think it is primarily working with Caltrans to get these lights fixed. I disagree that the Navy base is really the cause of it, because there are 4 lanes going to the East NAB every morning open, and the traffic volume going there isn't that high. It is not, you don't see a notable appreciation. It's a contributor, but I think also working with the Navy to help solve this as they move to the South Campus, that will help us some in reducing the traffic going past NAB, but we still got to get those lights fixed. And this is a matter of getting Caltrans to do their job and to make that highway work for the through traffic as a state highway, not as a city street. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hines.
Traffic's always a problem in Coronado. It's probably not going to get a lot better. It sounds like it's going to be dealt with right now with the traffic engineer report. Working with the police department, working with the Navy, it's not going to be a problem. And once the South Campus gets developed, it's going to take 10 years to get it done. And once it starts, it's going to be an ongoing project. We have to constantly retweak this study in order to make it traffic. And it sounds like everybody's moving in the right direction. If it doesn't work, it's going to have to go back and revisit it. But hopefully it'll be better.
Thank you. Residents emailed in a variety of concerns about enforcement of city laws and ordinances. Indeed, it is true that the city of Coronado has recently hired 1 new police officer and 2 new police service officers. But residents have asked, from speeding cars and blaring loud music on 3rd and 4th Street, to bike riding on Orange Avenue sidewalks, to biking above safe speeds in front of the entrance to the caves, some residents want increased enforcement of current laws and not what they perceive at times to be selective enforcement. What are you willing to do to address these issues? Mr. Bailey, we'll start with you and then move to your left.
One of the most common questions I receive when I'm knocking on doors or having town halls is, hey, what's the #1 issue facing Coronado? And of course, the #1 issue facing Coronado really depends on who you are and where you live. If you live over on the corner of Palm, where Palm connects up to Alameda there, it's the traffic that exits the base and makes an illegal U-turn and then cuts down Palm to go to 2nd Street. If you live over on the 300 block of A, B, and C, it's the traffic that as it's entering 3rd Street in the morning, turns left onto the 300 block and becomes cross-through traffic, contributing to many traffic accidents and dangerous driving behavior. Of course, the solution to this is, the short-term solution is increased enforcement. And we have, in our budget, we have the capability to absorb even more police officers that we could place and we could have them emphasize on additional traffic patrols. And I think we need to look at alternative solutions as well. So the question was raised about bicyclists riding on Orange Avenue sidewalk. A couple years ago, I teamed up with local business owners and our police department, and we got together and we created the Healthy Bicycling Rewards program, where local business merchants donated gift certificates that our police officers could hand out to kids as they walk their bike on the sidewalk to offer an incentive for exercising healthy bike behavior. In addition to that, the City Council also passed new citations that allow our police officers to actually issue citations to bicyclists for breaking the law at a reasonable amount. So now if you roll a stop sign, you can actually be cited. So I think it's an all-of-the-above approach.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mrs. Downey.
I agree with Mr. Bailey that when we encouraged, at the recommendation of our chief of police, that we petition the state to get permission to change how our bike laws are enforced, it gives them more authority to actually be issuing them. They didn't want to give a $270 ticket to some 8-year-old because they didn't have their helmet on. Now we've lowered it, so it's still significant. It's still going to be $100, but that's a little bit easier for a Navy family to swallow when their 8-year-old has to come home and say, oops. So it is our hope that that is going to start to get enforced, and then word will get out that they need to start following the rules. We also tasked our bicycle committee with coming up with speed limits for the bikes, because now that we have electric bikes and we have those Surreys and we have all kinds of things, both on our bike path as well as in city streets, we need to have more rules, because we really don't. So there's enough to enforce. A police officer can't cite somebody for speeding in front of the caves on their bike, because there isn't a specific law yet, but we're working on that one. And then the fact that we have now had an additional traffic police officer hired. That is their job. They are a traffic enforcement officer. What our chief of police is going to be doing is developing how that officer should be used, how that additional 2 other employees should be used. Our city council has made it pretty clear that the residents want more enforcement in traffic areas. So we have yet to see exactly how that's going to be done, but that is what we directed. So although we all want people to get tickets, only if it's not us. So we kind of have to see where and how. We believe we're going to be doing it in places where safety is an issue. So when they're around the school zones and places like that, that's probably where they'll start first.
Mr. Benzian?
Well, as someone who was raised in this town and spent over 35 years here, I have collected a fair number of tickets on Orange Avenue as a young kid. I actually got my first citation when I was 5 years old on my tricycle. I kid you not, between near Park Place. So
You still ride tricycle, right?
and I still ride tricycle. So I certainly, I know that our police can be vigilant and can be good about enforcing code, but it's true, we do need, especially on Orange Avenue, we need to enforce our rules better, and that sometimes that just comes down to manpower. So although I spoke with our police chief recently, and he said we're sufficiently staffed, perhaps we do need to explore that issue a little bit deeper. And then I think there's a question about noise enforcement as well, especially on 3rd and 4th, or if you're having a cup of coffee at Cafe 1134 and a motorcycle blasts by and sets off all the alarms, makes you absolutely nuts. My understanding is there's not a whole lot the city can do about that. The noise on these mufflers on these vehicles needs to be addressed at the state level. And I know I keep repeating that, but it's true. Coronado is governed by a lot of competing agencies and government bodies. So perhaps we can work with some of our legislators to address some sort of noise violation bill. That might be a little pie in the sky, but that's kind of the way we have to attack that problem. Hope I got that.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Donovan?
Yeah, I guess my comment is, I think maybe someone already said it, but the police react to what the city council tells them that they need to concentrate on. And I guess we have, not we, but the council has told them we need to concentrate more on enforcement, particularly for speed limits, for the bicycle issues downtown, that sort of thing. I don't think we need to add more police officers. Again, you have to watch your budget, watch the pension budget, that kind of thing. I think my sense is we have enough police officers, but we could probably use our volunteer force a little better. I know that we have a lot of great police volunteers that they have specific things they can do, and if we could expand that, we might be able to have more eyes on things. Then if there is a serious problem, then they can call in the police themselves. Speeding, I guess I would just put a plug in for the Gateway project. I think the Gateway project, as it's envisioned now, will help us to reduce speeds coming off the bridge, so hopefully that'll help 3rd and 4th. The council authorized funding to put some of these speed lights on, not lights, but you've seen them when you come off the bridge, they tell you how fast you're going, if you're breaking the speed limit. So those kind of things I think we could continue as well.
Mr. Hunt?
The problem isn't so much the speed. I'll be standing on 34th Street and I'll be looking at the speed signs. Most of the people aren't speeding. I mean, they may be exceeding the speed limit a couple miles an hour, but not significant enough to really get a ticket for it. It's just a volume. It just comes down to the volume. Now, you can control that volume without spending a lot of extra money, but just some extra control. Like Mike said, you don't have to have a police officer or you have a PSO officer just patrolling the streets. Put an extra car on the street and busy times of the day and drive up and down. That has an impact on traffic. And you can contact people. If you know people are breaking the law, I'll take that back. If you know people are creating a problem, you can contact that person. Nobody wants to be contacted by the police. You have a noisy motorcycle, you know we can't cite them because they might be licensed out of state. You can contact that person and just let them know that you're aware of the fact that you're making a lot of noise and there's people unhappy about that. And that's going to have an impact on that guy next time he drives down the street. So stop for not having your seatbelt on. You might not get a ticket. In the back of your mind, you're going to be saying, I don't want to get stopped again by the police because I didn't have a seatbelt on, so I'm going to put my seatbelt on. Bicycles, you got to enforce the law. Your PSO officer down there, where there's a problem, will stop the kids, give them a citation, give them a warning, just let them know that they're violating the law, and the law will become a change.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt?
We need to enforce our ordinances and our laws, but we also need to recognize that we can't solve the problem purely by enforcement. There's always going to be that, but I live here answer. I'm not sure we want a policeman standing on every corner or having that. So we have to balance the enforcement, a good enforcement program, with education, with adjustments to the streets to help reduce speed, if that's the issue we're talking about, with signage on these sidewalks on Orange, all those nice round signs that are on the pavement now, help make sure the bicyclists know what they're doing. And then if you're going to enforce, you've got a better chance of really balancing that education with enforcement. I don't think we want a police state in Coronado. I think we want to make sure that the laws we have are proper laws, that we enforce those laws, but balance that with other techniques to get people to comply. Thank you.
Mr. Meyer?
Well, it's not an ordinance, but the law is speed limit. We have a speeding problem in Coronado. I see people speeding up and down Glorieta, 3rd, 4th, Pomona until they get to the roundabout, and Ocean Boulevard, 1st. People are speeding all around town. I see that every day. I ride my bike everywhere. And I see people blowing through stop signs. I've actually been hit on my bicycle before. So I know it firsthand that people don't really pay attention to stop signs like they should. And for our police department, statistically we are down as opposed to other cities with the population of police officers we have. But I think that the crime level is so low in Coronado, we don't really need to increase our police department. But we need to go out there and we need to start writing tickets. If you see someone speeding, pull them over, write them a ticket. You shouldn't have to decide if by Should I pull this guy over or not? It's pretty simple. Pull him over, give him a ticket. If you see some kids or adults, blowing through stop signs on their bicycle, pull them over, give them a ticket, give them a verbal warning, so they know that we're doing this for their safety. And when you pull someone over and let them know you just went through a stoplight or a stop sign on your bicycle, you need to obey by the same laws as the car does. And a lot of these people on bikes, and especially the vacationers that come here during the summer, don't realize that just because you're on a bicycle doesn't mean that you can go through a stop sign or you can go through a stoplight. And it comes down to awareness and education and safety. And start writing more tickets.
Thank you. We have one more question from the community, and then we'll have our community final question. Many residents email the Coronado Times about maintaining safety on our beaches and mitigating the impact on pedestrian, bike, and vehicle traffic on Ocean Avenue during the summer months. Here are two of the most frequent questions we receive. What are you going to do regarding bonfire trash and fire pit waste that pollutes our sand and can be dangerous due to pallet nails and hot coals? And number two, would you approve an environmental study plan on a possible beach bike path? And if not, what would you do to reduce heavy auto, bike, and pedestrian traffic during the summer months on Ocean Boulevard? What, if any, steps should be made to make the street more safe during times of high tourism? So fire pit and potential path on the beach. Mr. Hines, will start with you, and then we'll move to your right.
Well, I'm going to start with the bike path on the beach, which is a hot subject among some of our citizens. And I don't know that a bike path on the beach is the right answer, but I do know that separating pedestrians, bicycles, and cars is the way to promote safety. And so we need to look again at our bicycle plan and figure out how we get pedestrians, bicycles, and cars into separate sections wherever we can to promote that safety and to help prevent the bicyclist from running over the pedestrian or the car from hitting the bicyclist. That may involve looking at the beach again, figuring out if there's a way at the beach or at Ocean or something to make that separation. As for the bonfire trash on the beach, I have the honor of joining my wife in cleaning up the beach once a month with the Rotary Club. And I look at our beach and it's really not that dirty. I'm very impressed that although there is trash to pick up every month and they have other people doing that we're in pretty good shape. So if there's some tweaking that needs to be done there, we just need to make sure that we get the right people helping and that we enforce any regulations we need to there. But I'm pretty impressed with what I've seen of our beach. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hauser.
I agree. I think the beach is in pretty good shape. I don't really think there's that much of a problem with trash on the beach. Maybe during the summer months when there's a million more tourists in the city, it may be a problem. A bike path, we got 15 miles of bike paths in Coronado already. I don't think we really need to run a bike path. I agree, bicycles and pedestrians all mix well together. So we're going to have a bike path, we're going to have clearly marks so we don't have accidents with pedestrians and bicycles running into each other. The lifeguards that patrol the beach, as far as the fire pits are concerned, I think we've got 6 or 8 lifeguards that do a pretty good job. If you need any assistance, and call the PD, we can call the assistance. But I haven't noticed I haven't heard any complaints of any serious problems with fire pits that do not hand or trash on the beach. Bike paths and something else. There's always a problem going on. That comes down to enforcement. We have to get people down to enforce it, make people be aware of what the rules are, and make sure they comply.
Mr. Donovan.
To address the fire pits, there's some people that think we should take the fire pits away from our beach. I don't support that. I think we should keep them. I've enjoyed, sitting around the beach at night with a fire. There is an issue with hot coals, and some people who make fires outside of the fire pits. That is a problem. And again, that's probably more of an enforcement question. How the lifeguards, if they have the authority to police that, may be a little better. But I wouldn't change that. I think the city does a good job picking up the trash, by the way. Sometimes it takes a while during the summer when there's a lot more trash to pick up, but they do a good job on that. As far as the bike path on the beach, I wasn't supporting that. I don't support that. I will tell you that a couple of months ago, the city started an effort called the Active Transportation Plan. It's basically 3 components. It's updating our bicycle master plan, updating our safe routes to school plan, and then creating a pedestrian master plan. And the combination of those 3 will be now our active transportation plan. So I know all this is going to be looked at again. Frankly, my view on Ocean Boulevard is if you're afraid to ride your bike down there, you should walk your bike or move inland and follow, the streets that are not so congested.
Thank you, Mr. Bentley.
I have great memories at our fire pits. I don't see a lot of issues with them. Spent a lot of time down there roasting marshmallows as a kid. I think we need to absolutely maintain those and make sure they're there for the future. I've stepped on a hot coal. Those things are going to happen from time to time. It's a minor issue in my view. With respect to the bike path, I don't support a bike path on the beach. I know we have a very active community and this is a very divisive issue. So I think there's ways to address that. I don't exactly know what they are, but just not behind the beach bike path. I think we have one of the last beautiful untouched beaches in San Diego, and I think we need to preserve that. I am interested in promoting a pedestrian and bicycle-friendly town, and so we need to always encourage that, but it's always been a bicycle and pedestrian-friendly community. Perhaps we need to make sure that our kids are able to get to school as safe as possible, so if there's another strategic route or two we need to put in somewhere, let's talk about that, let's figure out where that is, because we do need to make sure that everyone's getting around town safely. I know a lot of families that rely on that 6th Street bike path, but do we need to cover the town, paint the town into a giant spiderweb of bike lanes? Absolutely not.
Thank you, Mrs. Down.
The city hired security to actually oversee the fire pits on the beach, so they go and they check and they actually make contact with everybody that's at the fire pits. Then they go around when the beach closes. So we have stepped up trying to keep people from making illegal fire pits and leaving the coals. Is it perfect? No, but it's a significant progress from what it was prior to us stepping up to do it. We've also looked at, do we need to have better receptacles to dump the hot coals in? So we're working at ways to try and keep that from getting problematic again. As far as the bike path, it was never supposed to be a bike path on the beach. As Mr. Bailey has pointed out several times, the problem was the CIP project, when it wound up on the city's agenda, the name changed and suddenly people were afraid that's what it was, so it was stopped. It always was to figure out how we could get a separation between bikes, pedestrians, and cars. At this point, what the city has done is we've tried to look at the sidewalk. The problem is it's much smaller there, so we've tried to remove unnecessary cans or to relocate them so there's a little bit easier place to walk, or if you're disabled with your cane or wheelchair, wide enough so you can get through and not have to traipse around garbage cans. We also approved adding sidewalk along Sunset Park to try and give you another place to go if there's no room on the beach side. Does that solve a solution for bikers? No. But as an earlier speaker pointed out, hopefully the active transportation plan will come up with some ideas. The original thought had been to see, is it possible to put a bike path by the rocks? Maybe that would come up again. Mr. Bailey.
As far as the path on the beach is concerned, this was really a missed opportunity. Not because anyone on the city council was necessarily in favor of it. I mean, obviously the public came out strongly opposed to it. But it was a missed opportunity because that was the only direction the city council was pursuing. And there was a bunch of other options available to us. But we kind of became too focused on that one option. Some of the other options include expanding the existing sidewalk, relocating some of the light posts, relocating some of the trash receptacles, all with the intention of making it easier to traverse Ocean Boulevard. And so if I'm elected mayor, that is something I would like the council to revisit. We've already heard from the public that they don't support a path on the beach, but maybe the public will support some of these other options available to us. As far as fire pits are concerned, I don't think we should let a few bad apples ruin the fun for the rest of us. There are a bunch of us that have used the fire pits safely and responsibly. On one of them, I've seen Whitney down there a handful of times. I won't say what else he was doing down there, but I've actually been to 2 beach cleanups where there was nothing to clean up. If you get there after 8 a.m., chances are our public services department has already taken care of it, and that is just an example of our confident public services department and your taxpayer dollars at work.
Thank you, Mr. Mudd.
With the fire pits on the beach, I've talked to some people, they want them taken out. I've talked to a lot of other people, they want to keep them. So I think the problem is, what do we do to make it a better area, a safer, a cleaner area? Because there's charcoal everywhere, and that's a pollution. And there's nails. So I know it is illegal to burn pallets now, if that has nails, if I'm correct. So that's a good step towards it. The plan for the bicycle path on the beach, I don't want anything built on our beach. I think it's beautiful the way it is. I like how it looks, and that's why I love living by the beach, because how beautiful it is. Like they suggested, expanding the sidewalk. I haven't really looked into that far. I haven't done my homework on that. It sounds like a good option. I don't know if that's going to take away from the rocks or, impeding to the street. But I ride my bike everywhere, and I ride down Ocean. I live on Balboa, so I go down that street all the time. I feel safe riding my bike there. And I've been hit before, so I should know that. And I feel safe on the street. There are some times when, the neighbor's getting out and it's tourist season. It's crowded, and you don't know if someone's going to open the door and you're going to slam into the door. But I feel like the city has an awesome, it's a city made for bicycles. And you can go from anywhere to anywhere on a bicycle, and unless you're on 34th during rush hour. But I don't think you should put a bike path on the beach.
Right, it's time for our final questions. There will be one final question for our mayoral candidates, and then there will be a final question for our candidates for city council. So, Mr. Bailey and Mrs. Downing, I'll address you first. Have there been a major item that you believe city council has gotten wrong in the past 4 years? Or possibly can you cite an instance where you were disappointed with the city council decision where the majority of members supported an item where you were in the minority? Also, is there a city council decision that you helped lead that you're most proud of? Mr. Bailey, you answer first.
I think the pathway on the beach was, I think, one of the biggest disappointments I've had on the city council, because I think that, once again, it was a missed opportunity. I think that there are a handful of areas that our city could do a better job of addressing. One of those is how we dole out our community grants. And I really want to reform that process so that there's more oversight for taxpayers. One of the issues that I was on the losing side of that I was just kind of left scratching my head on was on the use of credit cards in political campaigns. We are now the only city in the nation where it is actually a misdemeanor for you to contribute to a political campaign using a credit card. It's a misdemeanor for you, and it's a misdemeanor for me to receive it. You can literally use your credit card to contribute to the Coronado Canine Mayor dog fund, but you can't use it to contribute to actual people. So that was one that left me scratch my head a little bit. But one of the areas I'm most proud of is Nixle. How many of you receive traffic notifications when there's a bridge closure through your cell phone? So when I was first elected to the city council, I received a message one day that, hey, by the way, the bridge is closed. I thought, wow, what a perk of being on the city council. I asked our city staff, who all receives this message? And they told me it was just the council members. And so I asked city staff, hey, how can we disseminate this information out to the public? And they said we couldn't. We didn't have the resources, and we didn't have the manpower to do it. And I said, guys, this is 2013, not 1913. And after working with city staff and the police department, we ultimately settled on Nixle. Now we have over 4,000 people signed up. But here's the kicker in all of it. We already had that software for 7 years.
Time.
We just had never bothered to implement it.
Thank you, Mrs. Downing.
I don't know that I voted on anything that I think we got wrong, but through the last 10 years I've been on council, I tried to encourage us to adopt things that we were ready to do. And I'm pleased to say we've adopted most of them. It just took us a little longer. Sometimes we take baby steps here. So it made me very happy that we moved our meeting start time at my request to 4 o'clock instead of 3, because so many people told us when they came out in droves to talk about the beach bike path that they were upset that it was so early in the day. There were people trying to get there from work. And so the council agreed to move it to 4, and I think that was a good thing for us to do, to encourage as much participation as we could. The other thing I tried to encourage, and eventually it's happened, we are now videotaping some of our commission meetings, because people said the same thing. They couldn't get there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to watch a historic resource commission or a planning commission. So now that we've taken over videotaping our meetings and then streaming them on our webpage, we're going to have more opportunity for you to see what your government is doing when you can't be there and go back and look at it in the past. We still, though, need to get it so that you know which meetings in advance are going to be taped. Because now it's just kind of a luck thing if you turn on the TV and you see they're playing Historic Resource Commission meeting from 2 weeks ago. So it's a work in progress, so now you can actually have a TV guide and figure out when you can see it. But I think those are good things we're doing, because as much information as we can give you about how your government works, you can give us feedback that you like it or you don't, or you want more or you want different.
Thank you, Mrs. Downing. Council candidates. Tell us why you are clearly the best candidate of the 5 who are running for office. Mr. Benzian, we will start with you and then on to Mr. Donovan.
too humble to answer a question like that. Look, the great thing about Coronado is that we always get great candidates, we get great volunteers in all organizations, so we all bring something good to the table, but I think it is important to separate us a little bit. One of the things I think that separates me is my list of endorsements, whether it's the mayor of Coronado, Casey Tanaka, council member Mike Wywoody, council member Al Obram. I have the support of our local leadership who I've worked with over the last 10 years in different community endeavors. They trust that I can get things done. Moreover, we've talked a lot about Caltrans regional issues that are going to affect our city, right? What do we need? We need relationships across the bridge to do that. I have those based on 10 years working in public affairs across the bridge. So consequently, I have the endorsement of Mayor Kevin Faulkner, the mayor of Imperial Beach, Serge Adina, our current state, or soon-to-be state senator, likely Tony Atkins, and a bunch of other statewide leaders, people we're going to need to work with in Sacramento. I think that's what sets me apart. And the fact that I have tons of forward experience here in town. So I know a lot of our stakeholders. I can hit the ground running when I'm elected. I know how our city works with all these different organizations. And I think the city council is a board of directors of the corporation of Coronado. You need to be able to have evidence of people, of all of us who work well on boards together to solve our problems moving forward. I think those are some of the two main keys that separate me from my competitors.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn?
Well, first I would say, as I said in my opening statement, I've been a resident for 40 years, not as long as Whitney has, but I've seen a lot of what's going on in the last 40 years in Coronado, so that helps with looking forward. I think the combination of my Navy experience and my corporate business experience, particularly in the leadership area, as in the Naval Reserves, for example, I was selected for a commanding officer of 3 different units. And that's a pretty competitive thing to be selected for. I was very proud of that. So I can take that leadership and apply that as a city council member. You know, I've had a lot of people tell me, well, when you get on the council, you're going to be one vote. You know, what can you really do? And my view of a city council member is it's more than just one vote. A leader influences the other people on the council by doing their homework, putting the facts together, and laying out a case for the right decision. That's how you get things done on the city council, not by just saying you're one vote. So I think the combination of my leadership, my financial management, and collaborative problem-solving experience, as I said in my opening statement, will serve me well as a city council member.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Mr. Hacker?
I've had 25 years in public safety with the Sheriff's Department. I worked in a lot of different cities, beach communities, Imperial Beach, Coronado Beach, Delmar. I had 2 restaurants in Wisconsin that were very successful. I think they did very well. I managed a drugstore in Walker, Wisconsin. At the time, it was an $8 million volume store here, which is very good at the time. It's still pretty good. If you look at this city as a big pie, you take 50% of the spending goes towards public safety. You look at 30% of the revenue comes from business tax, hotel tax. My experience with business and law enforcement addressed 80% of that money. So I think I'm qualified from that standpoint with essential elements of city government. City government is a nonprofit business. Customers are a nonprofit business. Our citizens are Coronado. It's a business philosophy that applies to city government too. One advantage or one selling point I think I have is that I'm not looking for another county or state office. I'm looking for a Coronado office. I don't have the future agendas in politics anyplace else. I'm not going to have a conflict of interest in voting on something that may be opposed by a county of 3 million people versus 25,000 citizens of Coronado. My personal interest is what's best for Coronado. I'm not concerned about the larger volume of population votes in the county and state there. So I'm going to count myself for Coronado.
Mr. Hines?
We live in a great, well-run community, and it's proven public leadership, proven servants of the public that have kept it that way. I am the candidate that has municipal government experience. I've got over 10 years on commissions and committees in this city. I have served on a commission in our first state capital, Benicia, California. I've served on 3 different commissions in Alexandria, Virginia during the course of my Navy career. I understand how municipal government works. And it's not exactly a nonprofit. It's a business that needs to serve the people. And so I think that I bring that experience. I bring my Navy leadership experience in crisis management, emergency response, As a bomb squad officer, I had to make decisions relatively quickly. I promised to listen to all the data and make the right decisions because I understand that those decisions are important to you. For those of you in Navy service, I retired as the Chief of Staff of 6th Fleet. Not a trivial job, the entire fleet that you're working for you. In my post-Navy career, I've had interagency responsibilities, matching the Coast Guard, the Navy, and state and local authorities together to build teams to defend our ports and harbors of the United States. I think I bring that. Previous candidate mentioned local endorsements. Mayor Casey Tanaka has endorsed me. Councilman Mike Waiwudi has endorsed me. Former Councilman Phil Monroe has endorsed me. And hundreds of other prominent citizens of our town have endorsed me. Check the website if you want to know their names. I promise, though, to keep an open mind and to listen to the citizens and try to make the best decisions I can. And I think that's really all. That's what you really want from your councilmen, is that they keep an open mind and make good decisions with the data they have and demand all that information. Thank you.
Mr. Munn.
Well, first off, I'm going to listen to every single one of you guys in here. I want to be the voice of this community. If something doesn't benefit you, any of you, I'm not for it. If it benefits you, and it's something that's good for this city, I will stand for it. And I will never change my mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Munn. This concludes our forum. Let's have a round of applause for our